These people are systematically oppressed by their own government.
We've been waking up to horrific stories every day, heartbreaking images separating mothers from their children.
They live in a police state, where they're monitored by one of the most advanced and intrusive surveillance systems in the world.
Imagine that the police force you to stand in front of a camera for biometric data collection.
Every online activity is tracked.
Imagine that the police force you to install spying app on your phone.
Their religion is restricted. Many traditional Muslim names are even banned for newborns.
Party officials are frequently attacking Islam as very old-fashioned, very backward.
These are some of the suspected detention camps where an estimated 1 million Uighurs are held. Many of them have not been heard from since being detained. Uighurs are a Turkic-speaking Muslim minority in China, living mostly in the sensitive frontier province of Xinjiang. It's more than 4 times the size of Germany and borders 8 countries. It's home to some 11 million Uighurs, but because of immigration from the rest of the country, today nearly half of Xinjiang's population is Han, China's dominant ethnic group. Nuri Tekel grew up in Xinjiang. A Uighur now living in America, he campaigns against the oppression of his people. But speaking out against China can be dangerous.
I worry my public advocacy will cause some unthinkable consequences to my family members. I haven't seen my mother for 15 years. This is the mildest form of torture that the Chinese government is imposing on us.
The Communist Party seems determined to crush Uyghur identity and is going about it in a systematic way. Although China has long been suspicious of the Uyghurs, as it has been of many minority groups, its worries increased after Al-Qaeda's attack on America on 9/11.
After 9/11, the Chinese government taken an opportunistic position, claiming they are also a victim of global terrorism.
In the minds of the party leaders, the Uyghurs are different, and different is bad because the control of the Communist Party is the only thing that stands between China and total chaos. In addition to that, there had been outbreaks of terrorism. So there was a sense that Xinjiang especially was getting out of control and needed to be brought back in line.
In 2014, a group of Uyghur terrorists went on a stabbing rampage in Kunming railway station, killing 31 people. This was one of several attacks that fueled the government's hostility towards the Uyghurs.
The Chinese government likens Uyghur to a cancerous tumor, Uyghur Islam as a mental illness.
Relations between Uyghurs and Han Chinese in Xinjiang have been tense for years. An eruption of violence in 2009 led the Chinese government to step up security. But it wasn't until Xi Jinping came to power that China really tightened its grip on the Uyghurs. Between 2012 and 2017, China's domestic security budget doubled. In Xinjiang, it tripled. In 2016, Xi Jinping appointed Chen Quanguo as the party secretary of the province. This was a calculated move to suppress the Uyghurs.
Chen Quanguo is a hand-picked official trusted by Xi Jinping, handling 2 of China's most sensitive regions.
Mr. Chen had a track record. He was party boss in Tibet from 2011 to 2016, another region where China wanted to crush ethnic unrest. He introduced a system of pervasive and insidious control. He increased police presence, stepped up the communist propaganda campaign in Buddhist temples, and created a culture of fear, encouraging neighbours to spy on one another. Now he has taken these tested methods to Xinjiang. Images of Xi Jinping have been placed in some mosques and on prayer mats across the province, an act that offends religious sensibilities. Beards and face veils have been banned, as have some halal products. This 800-year-old mosque is one of many that has been closed or bulldozed. The Uighur language is banned in schools in parts of Xinjiang. Uighur heritage is being wiped out.
It's a cultural genocide. It's a very specific purpose, systematic method, and ultimate goal. That is to stamp out Uyghur identity.
China is using world-leading hyper-surveillance techniques in Xinjiang. Face recognition cameras monitor Uyghurs on the streets. Spy apps track them online.
My own family have deleted me from their social media connections. Imagine that you missed your mother's and father's birthdays because contacting them will endanger their lives and may lead them to end up in the camps.
Party informants even spy on Uyghurs in their own homes. Roughly half of households are paired with a party member who can drop in at any time.
This official comes to their house, gives the children presents, talks to them about the wonders of Chinese communism, and of course reports back all sorts of details of interest to the authorities.
If you stand in the way, we'll take you in a camp. It's very clear policy.
Many Uyghurs have been detained in camps. China has spent hundreds of millions of dollars building at least 90 new compounds like these. People can be imprisoned for many reasons, or none at all.
We don't quite know how many people are in these camps, but probably the latest figures are at least 1 million people are in camps. Now, that's of the order of 1 in 6 of the adult population. That's an enormous number.
Inside, Uyghurs are brainwashed. There are also reports of inmates being tortured.
According to the survivors' personal account, they're forcing Uyghurs to denounce their religion. You have to allow us to convert you, to be reformatted, reprogrammed, to become just another Han Chinese.
China's official line is that the camps are designed to re-educate extremists and fight terrorism. But there's another reason, and it has to do with China's ambitious economic project known as the Belt and Road Initiative.
5年前，我提出了共建“一带一路”的倡议。
Loosely based on the historic Silk Road, this vast collection of infrastructure projects seeks to connect China with Africa and Europe. This would significantly expand China's economic influence. It spans over 70 countries and will cost hundreds of billions of dollars.
Xinjiang is sort of central to Xi Jinping's grand project. That project is Xi Jinping's sort of signature foreign policy. And therefore Xinjiang is so important to that he just does not want any trouble coming from Xinjiang.
The Uyghurs are victims of China's determination to exercise complete control over its population. Their future is uncertain.
I don't want you to end up in history books. I want to live just like anyone else. And my people deserve to live in this world with respect and dignity.
There are many accounts of people who have had their relatives disappear into the camps, and we don't really know what's happening to them.
Can I ask you why people are kneeling, blindfolded and shaven and being led to trains in modern China? Why? What is going on there?
I do not know where you get this videotape.
The Uighurs are a Turkic Muslim group. They live in the northwestern territory of Xinjiang in China, a region that is rich in resources like oil, natural gas, and copper. And it is a region that is also important to China politically because it was briefly independent in the 1940s. And since 1949, since it's been under Chinese control, there were various clashes and incidents of terrorism, both in Xinjiang and in other parts of China, either attributed to or claimed by Uyghur extremists. It seems to be that the Chinese authorities see Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities that are in Xinjiang, that they basically see them all as potential separatists or terrorists. So if you go to Xinjiang, it looks like somewhere that is in the middle of a civil war. There are checkpoints everywhere. There's armed police, military.
To be in Xinjiang means being checked every day, multiple times a day. When you go to a market, when you drive a car, when you take a train, even your smartphone is checked.
It is difficult to report there because you will be followed by state security agents that basically intimidate you and intimidate anybody that you try to speak to.
Why can't we ask some questions?
These police stations everywhere and, cameras, so many cameras.
The BBC has seen new, detailed satellite analysis of dozens of suspected camps across Xinjiang.
Wow, look at this. It's like a city.
The Chinese government claims that these camps are vocational training centers and that people are not forced to go to them, that the detainees in them are not detainees but students.
Like most boarding schools, students here take classes, play sports, and do all kinds of extracurricular activities.
And they learn, marketable, employable skills, and they learn Chinese, and they come out, better off.
This is what it wants the world to see.
But we know from accounts from people who have been inside the camps that these camps are de facto prisons and people have to go in them. They don't have a choice. They're separated from their families. And inside, they undergo basically political indoctrination. So that can include having to sit for hours and listen to speeches by Xi Jinping, or singing patriotic songs, or listening to lectures about the party. We also have heard of cases of torture. So people being strapped to something called a tiger chair for hours.
Each time I was electrocuted, my whole body would shake. I begged them to kill me.
There have also been reports of forced medication, forced sterilizations.
Mothers, fathers, siblings and lovers, all that disappeared. They're Uyghurs flung into Chinese camps. Their relatives say it's ethnic cleansing.
This is a crime against humanity, crime against the Uyghur people.
The US Commission on International Religious Freedom believing it might meet the legal criteria for genocide.
So sorry to interrupt, but according to your own local government statistics, the population growth in Uyghur jurisdictions in that area has fallen by 84% between 2015 and 2018. 84%.
That's not right. I
Chinese
gave you an official figure. You ask me, I give you this figure as a Chinese ambassador.
People have recently been talking about whether or not we can finally say that this is genocide. And what human rights investigators say is that this is not a genocide in terms of, in one go or in a condensed period of time, people being exterminated, but it's a slow process of erasing an identity and a culture and a population. Because we've seen things like forced sterilizations and IUDs being put into women and intermarriage being very much encouraged. It seems that there is some effort to reduce the population. And so some people would say that now should amount to genocide.
Now, women in China's so-called re-education camps have been systematically raped and tortured. That's according to first-hand accounts obtained by the BBC. It's estimated more than 1 million men and women have been detained in the camps in China's northwest Xinjiang region. China claims the camps are re-education centres to de-radicalise Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities. Our correspondent Matthew Hill has spoken to several former detainees and workers, and you may find some of their accounts distressing.
Tarsanai Zaiwudan is reliving a story she can barely bring herself to tell. She was held at one of Xinjiang's so-called re-education camps. These satellite images show the site where Tarsanai says she was held, sharing a cell with 13 other women with a bucket for a toilet. And she's haunted by one image: masked men coming down a camp corridor like this one after midnight.
They were 3 men. Not one, but 3. They did whatever evil their mind could think of, and they didn't spare any part of my body, biting it to the extent that it was disgusting to look at. They didn't just rape, they were barbaric. They had bitten all over my body.
The US have granted her safe refuge after investigating her claims. She's waived her right to anonymity and now feels free to speak out about the full extent of the abuse she says she suffered.
They had an electric baton. I didn't know what it was. It was pushed into my private parts and I was tormented with electric shocks.
It's estimated over 1 million Uyghurs and other Muslims are held in the camps. These never-before-broadcast pictures were filmed secretly in a camp under construction and published by a magazine on religious liberty. We've interviewed a former guard and seen his Chinese police documents. He's the first ever to come forward, and the risk of him speaking to the BBC is so great, we've reconstructed the interview with an actor.
Jews who were taken inside were locked in a cell which held 8 to 16 inmates. There were cameras watching them all the time, and there were books about Xi Jinping. They have to study the book and memorize them in Chinese. If they fell, the punishment was severe.
Many former camp inmates flee to Istanbul. Some talk of having to choose between punishment or being complicit in these crimes.
I worked 6 months as a cleaning worker for the women. Han Chinese men would pay money to have their pick of the pretty young inmates.
This was the first time Gulzira has told anyone the full extent of what she says she was forced to do.
My job is to remove their clothes and then handcuff them on their beds so they cannot move.
We can't say if the rape is approved by the camp commanders or even by those more senior, but the accounts of the many women I've spoken to include gang rape in public and are similar in brutality. The Uyghur rights group that helped Tursunai get to America say their full stories don't emerge until later.
Survivors of the camps have told of horrific tortures. Very often sexual abuse, however, is told in less detail. It's traumatic to remember, and women are often afraid of bringing shame to their own family members.
The Chinese government said in a statement that the Xinjiang camps offered vocational and educational training to tackle extremism and terrorism. It did not address directly the accusations of rape and torture, but it added the Chinese government attaches great importance to women's rights. Lies and absurd accusations, including mass detention, do not hold water.
It is very obvious. Their goal is to destroy everyone. And everyone knows it. These women are done.
Much of the testimony of the women, like Tursunai I've spoken to, is too disturbing to broadcast. But it's important, they say, that the world knows what's happened to them. Matthew Hill, BBC News.
You can read the BBC's exclusive report on the Uyghurs with more eyewitness accounts and analysis on our website. Just go to the usual place, bbc.com, and it's in the World News China section.